When did you decide to apply to business school programs? Which ones did you apply to?
I applied to like 14 schools. I did have the privilege of getting into every school I applied to. In 2020, all I did was study for the GRE. I would go about 4, try to be up before every morning, study for an hour to an hour and a half, get to work by 6, go through the day, and as long as I was home before like 9 p.m., I would do like 1 hour studying minimum at night, and then just every weekend I was studying for the GRE. That's the challenge, the joy of the challenge, is it gets messy.
I like to be in control of the situation.
You gotta figure out and respond to the situation.
Man.
The first 6 weeks at Westpoint is this thing called Cadet Basic Training, aka Beast. And you basically just get broken down. And throughout that process, a lot of the time I just had cameras on me.
They were filming a documentary.
Yeah, so the documentary ended up being up called A Game of Honor and premiered on Showtime.
Does everyone who's going through this program have abs?
500 to 1,000 feet off the ground is where the C-17, which is an airplane, is flying, and that's where you jump out. You got your reserve, you got a parachute on your back, it's hooked up to a line in the aircraft, and you shuffle to the door, and then you look up, and you jump out. At that point in time, you get to 5,000, you should be feeling the chute pulling you back up.
Yeah. How do you think about discipline?
Consistently having to be disciplined is really, really hard. But if you establish a routine that is a disciplined thing, like, I know I'm going to work out at minimum 5 days a week, and it's just like, that is routine.
Welcome to Cherie's Corner, a podcast where we dive into the topic of careers and hear from my friends and guests who are killing it in the business world, so we can learn from their lessons, their wisdoms, and their mistakes. I'm your host, Cherie, and I'm currently a business school student at Stanford University. Previously, I have experience working in tech and venture capital. In this episode, I interview my Stanford classmate, Cherie Baggett, who studied at Westpoint and shares his experiences from his time in the military. Cherie talks through the peaks and the valleys of his life, which are honestly more important to learn from. We discuss how he applies his disciplined work ethic to all facets of his life, and how he applied to 14 graduate school programs. Let's get started. Hi, Cherie.
Hey, Cherie, how are you?
Good. Thank you for being on Cherie's Corner podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
So happy to have you here. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. And I think we can first start off with any questions that you have for me.
Oh, yes. I have a couple questions here.
And I have not seen them, so I'm like a little bit nervous.
There's nothing crazy about them. First question. What are you currently excited about?
MBA 2-year, as we're getting started, we're already a month in. Mm-hmm. I'm excited for classes. Class registration is coming up soon. Did you see that email?
No.
Okay.
I'm behind on a lot of emails.
Okay, well, don't worry. It's opening in like 1 week.
Okay.
We need to register for classes in the winter. I feel like we're just a month in. How can we already be planning for like January timeframe, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for that. I was looking through the course catalog. I was just like, the electives are pretty interesting next quarter. I'm excited to hopefully take winning writing with Professor Glenn Cramen.
Yeah.
I want to try and be in some D-School classes. So I'm very much looking forward to class stuff. And I'm also kind of sad. I feel like the passage of time is weird, where I'm like, we have like 8 months left. How do I make the most of it?
I know.
But I'm like also happy, but also scared. And I feel like graduation is tomorrow. So.
Oh, I resonate with many of those things.
Yeah.
I do have all of my classes already planned out.
You do?
I just had a lot of time at the end of the summer. So I looked at all the classes.
Any advice? What's, top of mind for you?
Well, it's top of mind. I'm taking a lot of acting classes. So like if you want some of those recs, there's like movement for the actor, voice for the actor, beginning improvising.
In the theater department?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Cherie, I'm in a theater department class across the street as well.
Oh, which one?
The Spirit of Play.
Oh.
I'm going to take a theater class for the winter and also spring. I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? They're so good.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing.
What are you enjoying about those classes?
There is this sense of just observing more about yourself, the world around you, and how the essence of like empathizing and embodying someone else's experience is acting. And I think that if you can do that well, you can also be a great leader. Also, just the sense of like expanding my emotions and feelings and like the range of things I therefore have to understand.
Yeah.
So I can really empathize with the character and then play that character.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of great things that I'm learning.
Damn, I think I learned about the theater department taps way too late. I'm learning how to use my body and get more in tune with my body. And quite honestly, like in these past 28 years, I'm not comfortable like using my body and the space, taking up space around me.
Yes.
I think that's a powerful thing in the class, outside of the classroom, in the boardroom. How do I use my body? And this class is making me more comfortable with that.
Acting helps you become intentional about the movement of the body. And it's also something that I am working on. Before we start acting for non-majors, our class every day, we do this thing where we like, you stand there, you close your eyes, you like think about everything that was before you walked into the class, you let it go and you step into the moment. And I just love like, it's such a freeing thing. Also, it's like really simple, like, but it's also really big.
Yeah.
Like, you know what it is? Like, step into this moment, take full advantage of it. And I don't know, that's why I like, it's like this very different, but very applicable in my point of view, set of skills.
And the class only works if everyone's closing their eyes and stepping in. Like, everyone needs to be bought into the concept. If there's some people who are too cool for the class and not really like participating in the way that like you need this participation, it's not as fun, engaging, or you're not even learning as much.
Right.
So I would say, if someone had asked me what surprised me most this last year or this last quarter, it would be my improv/theater classes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. Oh my God. Theater minors, theater concentrations.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, so fun.
Question number 2, what is your favorite sport?
Ooh, to watch or to play?
Oh, both.
To watch is probably springboard diving.
Oh, really?
Oddly specific, but whenever the Olympics comes around, or maybe gymnastics, I think it's the combination of like the technicality of it. You need to be a performance athlete to do those things, and you have to be a performer, and there's a piece of art that's like shown, whether it's dance through like a floor routine or some sort of like beautiful dive and like twist and turn, and if it's synchronized, that's even crazier.
Right.
So I think that's really fun to watch.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I did springboard diving in high school.
Oh, so you're biased.
So I think seeing it, I'm like a real appreciation from like, damn, I could never.
Yeah.
I've tried, but I could never. So I think there's a lot of wonder in that sport for me. And then to play, this is not really a play, but like I think cycling is really fun. Like getting outside and going on a bike ride.
Yeah.
Especially in California and the Bay Area.
Beautiful.
So nice.
Yeah.
It's better than running and walking because then you cover more area. You can see things.
Think of this as a lightning round. 3 questions in a row. Okay. First thing that comes to your mind. Ready?
Yes.
What's your favorite ice cream?
Mint.
Waffle cone or bowl?
Bowl.
Ice cream on pie or on brownies?
Brownies.
All right.
How'd I do?
Oh, those are good. Those are fast. Did you say bowl?
Yeah.
Oh, I think your last 2 answers are questionable.
Yeah.
Waffle cone and ice cream on pies are my 2 wins.
The thing is, mint dictates. Like, it'd be hard to put mint on a cherry pie.
That's true.
But mint on a brownie, I feel like that would go together. Had I said vanilla, I think we'd have more options.
That's true.
I'm more of a bowl girl because I think the cone just gets too messy.
Well, yeah, that's the challenge. The joy of the challenge, is it gets messy.
I like to be in control of the situation.
You gotta figure out and respond to the situation.
Man.
But actually, I think I'm opposite of you on many of those, on all 3 of those.
Yeah.
Because I don't like mint ice cream.
What is your preferred ice cream flavor then?
Oh, that's tough.
You gotta choose one.
Butter pecan.
Whoa.
It's phenomenal.
Specific.
Yes, it is. It is great.
I feel like butter pecan is like a grandma flavor. It's like rum raisin.
The grandmas know. They know. It's very good. I think it's top 5 in a lot of like lists of ice cream choices.
Yeah.
I know that's true because I was with a group of my late night dessert friends and they challenged me on this.
You pulled it up.
Yeah. I was like, look, butter pecan is a top 5 flavor in at least like 2 or 3 lists. So
I rest my case.
exactly. I had nothing else to say.
Cherie, where did you go to undergrad?
Westpoint.
And where did you grow up?
Complicated.
Yes. You feel free to make this long form.
Born in Oak Park, Illinois. Moved a lot in that area until I was in 4th grade. 4th grade, I moved to Las Vegas. At the end of 4th grade, I moved back to Illinois in like Romeoville area. In 5th grade, I moved back to Las Vegas. In 6th grade, I moved to Stratford, Missouri, which is near Springfield, Missouri, which is like 3 hours from St. Louis. And I moved back to Chicago for high school. So
when
complicated.
When people ask you, what do you say?
Chicago. That is where most of the lessons that I internalize in life, I think, came from being there.
In high school? The GMAT or the GRE?
GRE.
And what was your score?
324.
TikTok or Instagram?
Instagram.
Okay. Right after high school, you went to Westpoint.
Yes.
How did you choose to go to Westpoint?
It's a long answer. So I played football and basketball in high school. And in football, I played defense for like 3 years, primarily. I was behind other running backs on offense. So I played defense, but I was also an offensive player, but was mostly known as a defensive player. So the coach from Penn, assistant coach, came to my house. And my mom had moved back to Chicago by then. And he came to her house. He said the only school better than an Ivy League is a military academy, but you don't want to go there because you have to march all day. Yeah, you got to march around. And so, whatever, one-off comment. Then the head coach came, and he said the exact same thing. As a marketing statement for his school, he's saying the only school better than Ivy League in general is a military academy. But you don't want to go there because you have to march all day. So come over here. And my mom was like, well, if that's a better school, you just go to a military academy. And so I ended up sending my film to Westpoint. And that is when the head coach came down to visit me in high school. I visited Westpoint and I saw like the team, the institution, the saying that the history we teach was made by the people we taught. And so it just felt like a place where I would be challenged to become a better person and not just a better student or athlete. And that's ultimately why I decided to go to Westpoint. But the path to getting to that was just a journey, I guess, of trepidation.
Sure.
But at the time, it's just like, whatever. You just got to do whatever it takes to go. I was trying to go to the league, play football, be the best, and go somewhere and play it.
Well, it's funny because I feel like those Penn coaches who had visited probably thought it was like a flex to be like, you should come to our school, but the only school that's better is Westpoint. And it sounds like that was maybe a seed they had planted that grew into a tree, and then you went into Westpoint. Could you talk a little bit more about your time at Westpoint, like towards the end, and then also how that led up to your career, your very exciting and fruitful career in the military after you graduated?
It starts out with me getting a call from my coach the week before I show up, and him saying, hey, there's gonna be some cameras that follow you around, but it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. And I'm just like, okay, cool, just a couple cameras, I don't know what that means, it's not a concern. And so I show up and there are cameras that, for sure, they're not small, they're
they're not like this $300 camera I got from Best Buy.
Well, no, they're not. But I will say that I take it back. They were small, but they weren't. They were very clearly there. You got a camera crew following you around while you're doing. Everyone else is acting. Well, everyone else is trying to be normal.
Yeah.
You are normal because I already knew it was going to happen. Everyone else is like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so the first 6 weeks at West Point is this thing called Cadet Basic Training, aka Beast. And you basically just get broken down and you're supposed to be inculcated into the values of the military and specifically West Point. And throughout that process, a lot of the time I just had cameras on me.
They were filming a documentary.
Yes.
About you. And your time.
About me, about the military academy, and specifically the Army-Navy game.
Yes.
And so I was one of the 4 people they profiled from Westpoint. And yeah, so the documentary ended up being up called A Game of Honor and premiered on Showtime. It's still on Amazon if you want to go see it.
If you want an inside look and Terry's life and also how he was broken down during Cadet Beast Week, please take a look on Showtime.
Yes. You will see a very young Terry with the camera in his face. And you'll see me making some very funny mistakes. I think I cringed a little bit. I just don't like watching myself. So I'm just like, oh. But so that's how it begins. Other than that, my time at West Point, a lot of it revolves around football. My freshman year, I'm playing. I'm not a starter, but I'm playing. I break a bone in my foot the 6th game of the season, so I'm pretty much out for the rest of the season. My sophomore year, things start out great. I have a 100-yard game first game of the season against San Diego State out here in California. Second game of the season, on our first drive, we go out. I have a good run. My fellow running back scores a touchdown, and I injure my knee. And it's like, I can't run. I don't know what's happening. Try to go back out there on the next drive, and I really can't run. And found out I fractured my patella. So I got surgery the week after that, and I was out for the rest of the season, essentially. My junior year, a phenomenal season. I set the single game rushing record at West Point for most yards in a game. I get a lot of accolades and awards, and all in all, just phenomenal season. For me personally, not great for the team. To be clear, we lost to Navy every single year, which is like the most important game we play every year is the Army-Navy game. We lost that game for 4 years in a row. So none of those are successful seasons. So we got a new coach my senior year. Implemented a way better culture for the team, made it harder to play, higher expectations and standards in practice. So overall, great for the team. For me personally, not great because he ran a different style of the offense. So that great junior season where I got the ball a decent amount of times was completely dwindled down, and I just didn't get the ball that much anymore. So not a personally great season for me, and not a great season for the team that year, but the fundamental foundations that were set in terms of like what it takes to win, the type of culture, what like leadership looks like, the discipline, and like the work ethic required to win was instilled during that period of time. And, as a senior and like with my teammates in that senior class, had we not like bought in and, laid it all on the line for that, I think it maybe would have taken like, the next group of seniors to buy in. But we did put in the work to do that. And, the next year wasn't perfect either, but the year after that, I think the team did beat Navy, and they just got consistently better. So we put in the right work, but like my senior year, just not great for me personally. So like that is like the ebbs and flows of my football career, which is it's like essential to my viewpoint on West Point and my experience there. I was a chemical engineer. I got to go spend like 3 weeks working at an MIT material science lab. I got to spend like 2 weeks at the Tufts Medical School and like follow some surgeons around. So I learned I didn't want to be a doctor. I had the opportunity to like visit Harvard, visit Yale. So just like see places that I personally would not have seen or thought about.
And then what about the next couple of years after you graduated?
Yeah, so I branched infantry. And so best way to explain that is infantry soldiers and officers pretty much train and deploy for combat as like a ground force for the most part. I had a mentor who kind of explained it to me in his words. You know, he was an engineer officer, and what he had seen throughout his career is essentially with combat arms and specifically infantry. It doesn't matter how much, you're like low crawling on the battlefield or like doing hard physical training or walking really far or, like shooting weapons. Like none of that stuff necessarily matters. What really matters is that if there are 40 people in a room and 2 of them are infantry, they will put those 2 people in charge. And so he said, never put yourself in a position to not be in charge. And that was like, well, yeah, I mean, I should for sure branch infantry,
Well, not everyone would have that perspective. Not everyone would respond to that advice in the way that you did.
That's true. And I think that's part of why he gave me the advice, because he could see who I was versus what I thought I was going to do. And that there was a relatively large disparity in how I thought these other branches would operate versus how the infantry operates. And so I think his advice, it was very definitely targeted towards me, knowing that I wanted to go do hard things.
And your potential.
Exactly.
Being in the infantry and on the ground, could you give us an outline of maybe some of the tours that you've done?
I was a platoon leader in the 82nd Airborne Division, which is at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. I had to think of the name. They just changed the names of the bases. And so that's like, the premier light infantry unit is the 82nd Airborne Division. Others may say differently, but that's my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions, is that the 82nd Airborne Division is like the gold standard of what it means to be like an infantry officer, just a long-standing history, and a lot of people who come from there who go on to go to like the special operations world and to lead in the military.
Why is it called airborne?
Because you jump out of planes.
Oh.
So yeah.
See, I thought this was a dumb question. I'm like, are you flying the planes? No, you're skydiving.
Yeah, well, not necessarily. It's a low level exit.
Okay.
So basically, 500 to 1,000 feet off the ground is where like the C-17, which is an airplane, is flying, and that's where you jump out. You basically, you got your reserve, you got a parachute on your back. It's hooked up to a line of the aircraft, and you shuffle to the door, and then you look up and you jump out, and then you count to 5, and by 5, like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. Like at that point in time, you get to 5,000, you should be feeling the chute pulling you back up.
Yeah. And well, that's because you pulled it, and then it...
Well, that's because like that. There's a hook that automatically pulls it.
Okay.
Because it's not skydiving. Like it is automatic opening.
Oh.
So that's like you're 1,000 to 500 feet off the ground, and it's automatic opening, and so all you need to do is get out of the plane. You'll be on the ground in, I don't know, like 30 seconds to a minute, and you're using this to seize an airfield, so it's a really good way to get a lot of combat power into a location very fast. You can get like 1,000 paratroopers on the ground in a relatively short amount of time, as opposed to walking them in, or even using helicopters, or driving in. Some of these places you can't drive to. So that's the 82nd Airborne Divisions.
How many times have you jumped out of a plane?
Honestly, not that many for an airborne person. I think I only have like 14 jumps. Maybe I need to go check my jump log.
Do you like it or no?
Oh, I enjoyed it a lot.
You do?
Yeah. The most fun jumps, though, are the ones where you jump. The most fun jumps I had, you jumped into water.
Oh.
We do, when I was in special operations, which we'll get to further. Special operations, you get to jump out of like helicopters and stuff. You get to do these little fun jumps. And so we jump out of like a Black Hawk helicopter into a lake. So from there, I performed well, had the opportunity to try out for the 75th Ranger Regiment, which is a special operations unit in the U.S. Army. And I went to RASP, which is the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, and I passed the training got selected. It's
Is
like
that a physical training?
It is physical, mental, probably a little emotional, maybe a little spiritual.
Are you allowed to talk about it?
Essentially, it's just 3 weeks of a lot of like physical challenges. You do like psych tests, you do leadership challenges. And it's basically putting you in situations where you are physically exhausted and under what feels like a lot of pressure to see how you will respond and execute in terms of tactical problem solving things.
I see. Well, like, I think to the layperson outside of the military, for example, like, I've seen articles about how Navy SEALs, their test is to swim in water with their hands tied behind their back. Is it similar to like that kind of like physicality, like testing and?
Yeah. So I mean, like, you got to do like a 12-mile road march. It's like that. Like the first 3 days, you're doing like, you do a physical fitness test, which is you got to do 80 push-ups, 80 sit-ups, 5-mile run in 40 minutes, and at least 6 pull-ups, and then you go take like a psych test maybe. Then you got to go do like a 12-mile road march. That goes right into like this series of mental games.
It's like a half Ironman, but more.
yeah.
More mental.
And then there's like some like I said, some like leadership events. Think of like, there's like team obstacle course style things where maybe only one person's, 2 people can talk. Everyone else needs to figure out like do what the 2 leaders say.
Yes.
How do you navigate that? Especially because you might not be the leader, but you might be used to being the leader in your other position. So how do you follow? Especially when maybe the person who's a leader is technically lower ranking than you. Like a lot of these, like, how will this person respond in this environment? And then just more, making you carry heavy things for long periods, unknown distances. And, how do you respond? And if you're losing in the time penalty, then you get more things. And you're not getting more people on your team. And if one person on your team is letting the team down, oh well, you got to keep going. You have to go carry a log for, like I said, another unknown distance. And then one of the final tests is the Ranger Physical Assessment Test, which is you wear your kit or your body armor, and you gotta run a mile, climb like a 12-foot rope. Then you have to do like 100-pound sled drag down the back. Then you've got to climb a 12-foot caving ladder, which is a very thin, not friendly ladder. And then you have to do like a sprint out and back and hop over an 8-foot wall. And then you got to run, or maybe you run 2 miles in the beginning and 1 mile at the end. All my Rangers who watch this will be upset that I don't remember it, but that's okay.
Does everyone who's going through this program have abs? Because I feel like it's the ultimate workout.
Everyone is definitely fit.
Everyone's
very fit.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
I was a platoon leader for 18 months. We did deploy to Afghanistan in 2019, just for a short, like 2.5, 3 months. But yeah, so overall, great experience in the 75th Ranger Regiment. After that, I went back to like the military training for officers. So like the captain's career course is something you do in between your 4th and like 6th year in. It's just another block of, but essentially, it's just overall instruction to continue to inculcate you in the values and needs and expectations of being a higher level officer. Because now as a captain, and for the 4 years before that I was a lieutenant, so I had different expectations and different responsibilities. And as a captain, I'd be expected to help plan more, as well as to manage like a company, which is 150 soldiers versus 40. And after that, I moved out to Tacoma, Washington, where I was stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord. And I was a company commander for a year, starting in the heart of COVID, maybe. Let's see, I took over in maybe like March or April. So a lot of COVID leadership.
Yeah.
I did that for a year until, like I said, I had 3 platoons that I was responsible for. And this time we did have vehicles. And so a very different problem when you have 150 people and then you have like 15, 16 vehicles. How do you manage that? So it was a great leadership challenge for me to learn.
Yeah. I'm so curious. 2 questions came to mind as you're talking about these leadership roles and leading teams of like 40 to then 150. You've been in these leadership positions for like basically, I guess, almost like the last decade. Like, what leadership lessons do you feel like you still have to learn at the GSB, or you have learned at the GSB? And I know we kind of touched on it a little bit with the improv stuff, but even more than that, or expanding on that, is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is probably just like empathy, you know? Not that I'm not an empathetic person. I just think I've been an empathetic person in the world where like being hardcore was the norm. You know, like you're playing football, you're playing basketball at a very high level for high schoolers, you're playing college football, you're in the Army, you got to go to special operations. And so I'm certainly empathetic to what those groups of people were going through and experiencing. I've never led in a software environment, you know? Like what are the things that like are hard for people, what are their challenges? And so I think a lot of my learning has come from just talking to classmates and understanding their lives, their experiences, and their perceptions of the world. And I always appreciate those because I think if you have enough perspective, you can solve way more problems if you can think about it from a different lens. But 2, it's hard to really lead someone or tell them to do something hard. And honestly, if you really talk about leading them, I think it's really hard to lead people if you don't understand where they come from. Like I think my viewpoint is, you know, you should understand the people who work with you, who work for you. And I know that's like, I've learned that that's not a true concept everywhere outside the military. And to be frank, you know, does everyone in the military believe that? I'm not certain. I'm fairly certain most people do. But like, that's what I want to bring to the workplace wherever I go. It's just like, I would like my employees and peers to be understood. And by understanding them, making sure they feel valued. Yeah. And then I think when you do that, you know, I think it becomes a lot easier to ask someone like, hey, you know, I know your daughter's volleyball game was last weekend and your son's birthday is next weekend. I need you to work on Saturday morning for like just for 2 hours. But I really, it's important for the business. Yeah. And that's still going to be hard to do, but it will be received, in my opinion, much better if that person knows that you value them and you're not just asking them or telling them to do something from some state of, you work for me.
People want to feel valued, they want to feel understood, and they'll probably do their best work when that happens and there's that unlock.
Exactly. I didn't finish my military career though.
Yes. All right, let's keep going.
My last role.
Yeah.
I was doing well as company commander, was trying to figure out if I didn't know if I was going to stay in the Army. I didn't know if I was going to go to special operations again. And so my boss asked me, you know, hey, do you want to apply for a position as an aide de camp, which is, it's similar to what in the civilian world is called a chief of staff. It becomes confusing because in the military, there is also a chief of staff role, which is way more similar to like a COO style thing. So I put my hat in the ring and I ended up getting an interview with the incoming division commander. And I got the role. So my last job in the Army, I saw my boss every day lead a 12,000 person organization. And so that brought a whole different set of understanding of how you lead a large organization. You know, like 150 people, you can still see most of them every day.
Right.
You like, once you say something, like people will hear it. So how do you lead when people don't see you every day?
Yes.
And my biggest takeaway from that is just like communication. Like, just my boss, I saw him consistently say the same things over and over and over again. And after like 6 months, people started to say those things back to him. And they had finally internalized it. But it took legitimately like 6 months and hundreds of times of saying the same thing. And so communication, the other thing he did was trying to go see the people who are at the lowest level to get understanding of like, what does it mean when I tell someone to do this? Like, you know, he would ask my advice sometimes because I had just come from leading a company. So I'd be like, oh, you know, sir, if you were telling me to do that, this is how much time it would take out of my day. This is how valuable it would be to soldiers, or how not useful it would be. And he wanted like the real feedback. So those are like my two biggest takeaways. And then I left the Army. But that was my journey.
When did you decide to apply to business school programs, and which ones did you apply to? In
like 2019, you know, I'm thinking I'm going to leave the Army. So I think I'm going to be like an entrepreneur, a real estate entrepreneur. And so I'm sending Dan Alberti like my pitches.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, these are actually some good pitches. These are pretty good. But he's like, why would I give you my money? You don't have any experience. You don't have an MBA. He's like, if I was going to give somebody my money, I go find someone who like had like 5 years of experience, or who had like an MBA that could prove that they had like some knowledge and some type of expertise. So this is like January 2020. So he's like, just go to Stanford and get your MBA. And I'm like, okay, you know, I don't know how hard that is. And so I start applying. I start taking the GRE. And obviously, you know, by like February, this is probably at the end of February is when this happened. So it's already COVID. And so
dealing with
March,
that.
In like March, April, I'm like, I cannot take the GRE and apply to Stanford. Like, this is actually really hard.
Yeah.
And so in 2020, all I did was study for the GRE. And so I was a company commander at that time. So I wake up at like 4:30, I wake up at 4, try to be up before every morning, study for an hour to an hour and a half, get to work by 6. When we had like our daily morning meeting, then we go do our physical trading at 6:30 to 8:30, go through the day. And as long as I was home before like 9 p.m., I would do like 1 hour studying minimum at night. And then just every weekend I was studying for the GRE.
How long was that studying process?
Well, long. From June, I took the test the first time in November. Yes, like October 30th, November 1st, 31st, somewhere in that window.
Spooky.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't spooky for me. I was only thing that mattered were, one, the COVID restrictions were really big because we were also about to go to a training event. So like, you really, as a leader of 150 people, I could not be outside, because if I got COVID, and like, then I would be proving, one, that all the rules we're putting in place don't matter, or that I'm above them, which I was not. But 2, also I was doing the take home test. So, you know, the home studying. So I did my first GRE test then, which was my highest score. And I kept taking it until like March of 2021. And I also hired like an application consultant. Happened to be a guy who taught at Westpoint and went to Westpoint. So it's very helpful. And he was like, all right, you know, you should also take the GMAT, try to get your score up. 324, we don't know how good that is. And so I was going to switch. I was like prepping to take the GMAT as well.
Wow.
Starting in like May, like April and May, I was studying for the GMAT. And then, as I talked about earlier, I got this aide job, right? And so I had to make a choice where can I be good at this job in the Army, study for the GMAT, and start applying to schools at the same time. And I didn't think I could do 3.
Yeah.
I thought I could do 2. And I was like, well, the test is just going to have to be a good enough score. Mm-hmm. And so...
And it was good enough.
Yes, it was good enough. Mm-hmm. And so that's like the pathway for me applying to school and like the reason I did.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Like, I mean, I hear stories of our classmates like studying for these standardized tests. I don't think any of us had like a 4:30 a.m. wake up. It's like you wake up, you're doing fractions in the morning or like isosceles triangles, and then you're going to your workout and your job of leading hundreds of people in the military.
Yes. It was just whatever it takes. I mean, like, it was. Yeah. If I had taken pity on myself, I would not have done it. Certainly it was hard, but the admissions committee would not have cared if I said like, I could only get like a 312 on the test. Studying was so hard. We give me a break, and so I just told myself I didn't have a choice.
How do you think about discipline? Like you've kind of hinted at it, I think, in parts of these conversations. Even before we started, I asked you like, are you comfortable in this chair? We'll be here for a little bit. And you're like, in so many words, you're like, I've been in less comfortable situations. It's totally fine. Yes. Or like, waking up so early to study and having your day. How do you think about discipline? Where do you draw that discipline from? Is it like internal, external? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know how do I think about discipline?
Yeah. Do you think about it?
I think there's the saying, I think the SEALs coined it, but that discipline is freedom. Oh. And I don't disagree with it. Like, I think knowing that on Tuesday and Thursday, I'm going to go run at 6:15.
Yeah.
Gives me the freedom to be like, no, I cannot stay up at night. And like the flexibility to be like, I really want to go to this event. Mm-hmm. And I know there's lots of peer pressure for me to go to it. But I am absolutely free to say no because I have something to have to do tomorrow. And so I think that is, generally speaking, true. Like, having something that you have to do is, in some ways allows you to say no or yes to other things.
Sure.
But I think there's a caveat in there, like, discipline versus, like, routine. I do think that consistently having to be disciplined is really, really hard. But if you establish a routine that is a disciplined thing, like, I know I'm going to work out at minimum 5 days a week. And it's just like, that is routine.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to be, I'm not fighting and looking at my schedule like, oh, gosh, I really don't want to work out today. I'm like, okay, when am I going to work out? This is an inconvenient time. Is it more convenient than every other time on the calendar? Yes. Okay. So, like, will I be in class in shorts and a t-shirt? Yes. Is that whatever it takes? Also, yes. And so there's a lot of ways in which, and that I'm not truly being disciplined because it is a routine. And I think that is what allows me to do some of these things, which is, I guess, some internal motivation. I certainly have external motivation where I think of, I don't want to be out of shape when I'm 40.
Yeah.
So the next 10 years of my life are really important in building and maintaining really good habits, because I do think this is a stage in my life where if I stop working out, it will be harder than it ever has been to start again.
Sure. Versus
just maintaining even some low-level effort of staying fit will help me when I'm like 53, be like, well, I just have to go work out. Doesn't matter what it is. So I guess like those are the two ways. If I answer the question,
you are answering the question, and I'm hearing a lot more here in the like, I want to be like physically healthy when I'm 60. Mm-hmm. Like, what does it take to do that? Working backwards.
Right.
There's a lot of future thinking, future planning for 60-year-old you,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of things can change from now and then, but this seems like a constant that you will have in your life, or
Yeah.
a constant desire, constant need, a value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I value fitness for sure.
Yeah.
Or like health. Like health, and I think that like most important to that is you have to move your body.
What has life been like at Stanford with your partner?
Yeah. So with my wife Allison, it is tough. You know, the GSB has its own like cycle, series of events, and she is a third year resident as an ear, nose, and throat surgery resident, which has its own life cycle and series of events. And the biggest issue is that our breaks in time in those two different worlds almost never align. So we have to be very intentional, which we have not been perfect at making time to speak to each other. And so ideally, like every weekend we're chatting, but that can still be hard because, you know, she might be on call for a weekend and just that can change our entire schedule. Or I might be at a touchy-feely retreat or a BBSA retreat. You know, like there's things that happen at the GSB on weekends. And so I'd say the most valuable thing that we've done is she's been able to join on trips. Mm-hmm. And so last year we went to Singapore together, just us. But we went to Vietnam together with like 8 or like 12 GSBers.
Yeah.
Went to India together for 10 days with like 30 people from the GSB, our classmates.
She is part of the community.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Shifting gears a little bit more, what's next for you after the GSB?
Yeah.
What's the plan?
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I've had kind of a not a straight linear path of what I've explored here at the GSB. Pre-GSB, I did 10 weeks of private equity internships, 4 weeks at a healthcare focus firm, 6 weeks at a general middle market focus firm. Coming to the GSB, I thought I would be a product manager, and I did like initial recruiting for that stuff and realized I just didn't really care. And then there's a professor, Scott Brady, who has this framework called research-driven ideation, RDI, which really focuses on you don't need an idea to start a business. You can start out and do research and find an interesting problem. And if you find the right problem, you can start a business to solve that problem, right? And so I started on this process because I wasn't clear to me what I wanted to do. And I started researching water. And so I started February just interviewing people, doing research, getting ingratiated into the water community.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting an internship through Stanford, the both Chan and summer entrepreneurial immersion programs to work on this water idea. Did that for 8 weeks. So from February to like August, worked on water as a primary focus. Realized solving problems is fun, but like I didn't care about water that much. And I didn't want to be a solo founder. I worked at a startup for another 4 weeks, a startup investment firm called Movi Partners, which was a great experience. And I really enjoyed it. Helped them do like strategy for what their next moves are. But all those things helped me really narrow down that I kind of, as we talked about, I just really love and care about leading people. And so what I want to go do is be put in positions where, whether it's in like services world or like the hardware or industrial world where like there are people or there are logistically complex things that have to be done. And I would like to be a leader or operator in that environment. And so those opportunities I'm chasing, whether they're like growth stage startups that operate in that world, or there's like private equity, operations style roles where you drop down into a mid-size, middle market company. And that just gives me an opportunity to empower, lead, motivate, inspire, and to execute and to build great teams. And that's what I think I want to do.
Sounds like there's a lot of experimentation that you've gone through over the last, I guess, like year and a half, even before business school started, to see what you like and what you don't like and cross things off the list.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. I hadn't heard of research-driven innovation before, RDI.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
You should take Formation into Ventures with Scott Brady.
Trying to.
You will learn about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a valuable process, if nothing else, to be aware of as a way that companies have successfully formed. So I took it and went full speed. It was great.
Yeah.
I didn't start a company, but I learned a lot.
Yes, I'm trying to take that class, so hopefully I can get it in the winter or spring.
Yes.
And then just final question for you about your MBA application process. What advice would you give people who are going through that process right now, and perhaps someone who might come from a similar background as you?
Yeah, so
would you like to
be
address?
Clear, so just to be honest about my process, I did hire an application consultant who was a veteran himself. And he didn't have that many clients, so it was pretty much just working with me and like a few other students who were applying to either law school or to undergrad. He works with a lot of athletes. 2, I also work with MLT, Management Leaders for Tomorrow, who focus on helping diverse groups of students into business schools. And with their help, I applied to like 14 schools. So just every school you can imagine. And I also used the help of the consortium, so I could do like 6 applications with really only 1 full application in that process. And I did have the privilege of getting into every school I applied to, with the exception of Stanford. At first, I was waitlisted. So originally I was going to Boston. So I wanted to like just put that out there as like my framework, to be honest about what I did. My number 1 piece of advice, I think, is be honest / know yourself. As we mentioned earlier, I started to apply in 2020, and in that initial phase, I realized that applying was going to be harder than I thought it was, and that if I could get help, it was not a bad thing. And so that's why I ended up finding an application consultant, and I did think that was valuable. So I think be honest with yourself in terms of what you think is best for you, and if you can, or if you think it makes sense, don't be afraid to do that. And then I think be as authentic as you can. I have heard stories, I think there are people who may tell you to like, you gotta write your application this way, or about this one thing, and I don't know. I think that can work to get you into like some schools for sure, but I think my viewpoint is just try to be who you are and lean into that, because who you are is more than good enough. And so I think those are the two main points. I will put, I guess, on the other side of this, one other thing is, if you are relatively far out from applying, just try to be the best at what you do. I think like nothing bad will happen if you try to be the best at what you do. You know, not saying burn yourself out, or like, you know, you can obviously take this the wrong, like to the max, but like the attempt to be really good at what you do will always be valued well for a business school application, and for any application for that matter.
True.
And so I think that's just like from the get-go, if you're in the early stage, just always remember, in my opinion, just try to go for being the best.
Yeah.
Or one of the best. You know, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
But I think it's always worth it.
Totally. I think it's also identifying places where you can leverage where you're really good, which is a mix of like introspection and also, I think, having an unbiased view of what really good means.
Yeah.
To be able to excel in a certain area. And you're just best at being you.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, those two things, they reciprocate. It's a circle. If you're authentic, you try to be the best, like, it will lead you back to being more authentic.
Yeah.
If done properly, there is a realm where this can go off the tracks, and trying to be the best can lead you down a bad path where you become very inauthentic, but also like self-destructive. I'm not advocating for that.
Don't do that. Find the balance.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Terry. We killed it.
Crushed it.
Also, 14 out of 14. Not a bad ratio, I might add.
You know, I'm extremely grateful. And like, there were so many people who helped me get to where I am, that my success in application was certainly part of it was my hard work, but a lot of it was other people taking chances on me. And so, I have a lot of people to thank, for that.
Definitely. What a gracious answer. You are a leader. You're the leader I would follow.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Cherie's Corner. Before we get to the takeaways, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'd really appreciate it if you could share this podcast episode with someone who might find it helpful. Alrighty, let's get to the takeaways. One of the most important takeaways for me is when Terry said, "Be the best at what you do." It sounds like a pretty blunt statement, but you can tell that he's lived this mantra for most of his life. It's this mentality that's gotten Terry to where he is today. And honestly, this is not the first time that I've heard something like this. My friend once told me, be the top 1% of what you do, which is basically what I think Terry is saying. As Terry put it, even if you don't get to the top level or the best at what you do, there are so many lessons that you learn along the way about yourself and about the task at hand. It's the process and the journey that you go through where you can push yourself in a healthy way. The second big takeaway from this episode with Terry is that I love how transparent he was about his application process. Applying to graduate school programs can be emotionally and mentally taxing, so don't be afraid to ask for help along the way. Many graduate school applicants hire consultants to help them with their process. Everyone's application process is different. If that's something that you have access to or even want or need, definitely consider it. Especially when you're applying to so many different schools like Terry did that all have different flavors of what they're looking for in students. The third big takeaway is that I love how Terry talked about research-driven ideation. He learned this in class this past year, and it's influenced how he thinks about what he wants to do after he graduates. He uses RDI to research certain industries, unearth the problems that they're facing, and then come up with ideas to solve the issue at hand. Overall, Terry's not afraid to experiment with what he likes and what he doesn't like to discover what's next for him. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Cherie's Corner. I'll see you next time. Bye!